Warlock, and Druid. Shaman has been banned out, and then Raven, Mage, Paladin, Hunter, and Warlock, and they have been banned out as well. So I believe we're about ready to get into game. So, I mean, what kind of decks would you be expecting these guys to be bringing for the first game in this series?
You want something solid like a Zoolock that can beat pretty much anything on its day. I mean, we've seen players bringing decks that, like 3 decks especially, that can beat anything. We've seen some players kind of go with things like Freeze Mage that maybe can struggle against certain decks, but it's definitely a theme within this tournament that players are just bringing strong decks that win against almost everything.
Yeah, so Druid, for instance, will win against pretty much anything given the right draws. I really hope that BoarControl's webcam somehow comes on during this series, because I'm going to miss the many reaction faces of BoarControl. Speaking of BoarControl in particular, he is one of these players. He hasn't been grinding on EU West this season. He's probably going to do that later in the season just to try and get a top 100. He's been on NA, where he does say that it's, let's not throw too much shade, but he says it's easier. So he's over there on NA.
That's where I'm going wrong. I need to go on to the NA servers.
This is going to be it looks like the fabled Murloc Paladin coming out from Raven, and BoarControl with one of his favourites, the Patron Warrior.
That'll be the 3rd week Murloc Paladin for Raven, will it not?
It will be, yes. He beat Cypher with it last week because Cypher messed up his lethal chance.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a hard one to take.
It was a hard one to take.
For us all.
Roped out on the combo, which it's never something pretty to see.
So Murloc Paladin against Grim Patron, generally I'd like to favour the Murloc Paladin.
I would as well.
Purely for its removal and its way of dealing with patrons. Already he's got that Pyromancer and a quality in hand that can instantly deal with anything that's on board.
Realistically though, you need to have those equalities, because there isn't really the other removal in your deck that can deal with 3/3s, right? Unless you're going to flood the board and then just try and churn him down with either the Wild Pyromancer or a double Consecration or something like that. So you realistically, you're going to save that equality, and I think that's why Raven kept it in hand, because it's such a useful tool against a flooded board, especially with the Pyromancers. So given the outset, it looks good for Raven so far.
And it's a decent opening hand as well, having the Loot Hoarder obviously to draw cards. Also, the Doomsayer to fall back on if he feels the board's getting a little bit out of control. I mean, even if he saw a Frothing Berserker be dropped from BoarControl, just a Doomsayer as a response is always a great way to respond.
Yeah. Obviously, he doesn't know about things that he's got in his hand to buff up that Frothing Berserker, but...
Shh, don't tell him.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, just dropping... I think you're going to see here the Frothing Berserker on curve is just too good to pass up.
So with the amount of removal this Murloc Paladin does have, do you still need to get all of those Murlocs out to win this game? I am fairly certain in one of the weeks we saw, did we see Raven win without even using...
Two war leaders. He didn't even have 2 war leaders on the board. It was because of the mess up in terms of lethal. But yeah, I think, okay, he's going to go for Corcoran Elite on curve here. Sorry, I'm just going to make sure that our spectator doesn't go into a grey fuzz, so you can see the cards.
Very aggressive to just play that kind of just outright like that. It's not something that I'm really used to seeing just played on curve just for the sake of a minion.
Yeah, I guess you kind of realize, oh, what a top deck. Holy moly.
I mean, he had ways of dealing with his Doomsayer before.
He did, yeah.
Just the War Axe is just probably a better option because you clear it for 2 mana.
You play your Frothing, right? You're going to start to apply pressure. You just play your Frothing. You could even then, you know, you're not going to...
Your Dread Corsair as well is going to cost 1 mana.
Exactly.
So maybe a play involving that.
I think you want to try and build a board to try and encourage that Pyromancer quality to come out when you don't have the patrons on board.
You want him to use one of the combos, right? You wouldn't be expecting him to have 2 combos in hand, like we can see Raven does have there.
You could even go for Dread Corsair along and slam the Bluegill. Just to fully clear board. Yeah,
for sure. And I think that may be the play that he's looking at here, Munchballs, because again, you don't want to overcommit your Frothing Berserker here because of the board clear that he provides. He's actually even going to go for the Armor Smith just to try and start building some armor. Now, realistically, you do need a hell of a lot of armor to deal with the burst from the Murloc Paladin. Over 2 anything can happen. They can do the equivalent of about 60 damage, probably more, 70 potentially. So it's a very, very high amount of burst to deal with, and obviously you're not running any taunts apart from this Dread Corsair on the former patron, so you are going to take that fully to the face. This is a deck.
Could he clear this board? Almost clear it with, but he's going to have to use one of the Pyromancers.
So what would
Pyromancer coin consecration.
That's probably the play I would have, right?
Does the consecration proc before the Pyromancer? It does, doesn't it? Before the Pyromancer does another wave of 1 damage to everything.
Yes, it will. So you will have a complete clear of everything. You will give a fair amount of armor over to BoarControl here, but it's probably the best play. And you don't use your equality either.
Yeah.
He is going to opt to go for the equality though.
Okay. Doesn't want to give that armor to BoarControl, I suppose. And he does have that other combo in hand, and also baits him in, thinking maybe now the Patron Flood comes down.
Yeah, it saves as well. You've got the Equality Consecrate to if patrons do flood the board, that's going to completely clear for free. You deal with at least one of the patrons that will come down.
None of those are great for patron. Really, you want the mage hero power there, right?
They're all terrible. They are all terrible, but I would probably take the shapeshift.
Just because you can get more armor, but he's going to go for the totems.
Okay.
I mean, I suppose totem with the healing can be really good with patrons, because let's say you whirlwind your patrons and then you heal back up. I mean, that's great. It's
not good with your inner rage, though. Your inner rage is going to do 2 damage now instead of 1 and not actually give any more, at least as far as well, it doesn't give you any more attack damage. So good for clearing stuff, but against a Murloc Paladin, you're not really there to clear stuff. You're there to just apply as much pressure as physically possible.
So the loot hoarder being drawn is good. He's going to want to be finding more Murlocs here to try and set up that anything can happen combo.
There's really not a lot in hand here. He just kind of has to tap out his turn, play a dude, but kind of it sucks when you're in this kind of point in the game when you know the Grim Patrons are about to be coming out to kind of just pass away your turn like that and not really be able to do much to get presence on the board. Dr. Boom going to come out now.
But this is what I said, BoarControl is really just trying to bait out both of those quality combos before he even considers putting any Grim Patrons on board. I really like this.
I prefer that. I do like that from BoarControl. He knows the issues that his Grim Patrons are going to have versus another equality. Pyromancer or equality Consecrate. He's trying to put a threatening of a board down as possible to bait it out again, because I don't think he'll be too fussed if this Dr. Boom goes down to another equality, because he knows both equalities are gone. That is going to be free for him to just start flooding with patrons, and there isn't anything realistically on the Paladin's side that can fight for BoarControl versus patrons, so it's going to be a ticking timer for him.
And he took a while to decide how he wanted to trade there. I like that he's being very patient about his play, not rushing his decisions.
So he's going to have to equality Consecrate or something now.
Yeah. War Leader comes out as well, so at least
if he doesn't,
he's starting to get Murlocs.
He is possibly dead.
Yeah, but I think
just looking at the inner rage and the slams being there, I think actually, he's dead if he doesn't. So I mean, he's not going to know that, but he's definitely going to be worried about it. And that is the second equality used now.
And that's fine for BoarControl, because now it means that inner rage can come down, slams can come down. This board will start to fill up with patrons very quickly. He does need to be careful, though, because if he doesn't leave any patrons up with 3 health, which obviously is okay, you just flood the board, right? Just start flooding the board like crazy.
That Whirlwind top deck is immense. That's incredible. That's really going to help fill that patron board.
You do have to be careful to not flood the board too hard, so that if he does manage to get a nice Consecrate off, that you don't spawn any patrons and then you lose all of your patrons. But he knows he can go for this for free now, because there are no equalities left. A Consecrate will do nothing to help Raven in this situation. There's 2 fully health patrons on board.
Oh, but the
True Silver's okay.
Yeah, you can definitely get rid of one of them.
But you're just going to basically end up with 2 patrons instead of 4. You have to Consecrate, right? Or you could coin Healbot. There's the only 2 options you've got.
I think the issue, though, if you coin Healbot is, to some extent, you're just going to be delaying the inevitable. You're still going to have more patrons snowballing in next turn. He's going to go for the Healbot.
I think he's just got to hope that he can't proc any more patrons right now. But with
2 battle rages in hand, he's going to have.
Wow.
That's going to fill his entire hand, by the way, if he does end up battle raging, or at least no, he's not. He's not damaged his own character.
And an inner rage as well.
Oh no.
All the tools.
All of the tools.
That was about as good of a draw as he really could have got, to be quite honest. Battle Rage comes out for 4. Still has the 2 mana to play another one. unlimited tools coming out, and he even gets the Grom just as a finisher, if he even needs it.
And the Corcoran Elite, and the Death Spite, and the Frothing Berserker.
Well, I mean, he's literally just drawn like half of his deck right there. Or a third of his deck, at least.
And he does cleverly trade the Patron in to make sure that if Consecrate does come down, he can still maintain a bit of board. But even if Consecrate comes down, that seals the deal for Raven, right? Because
if Consecrate does come down,
you just give
I was going to say you should surely hit the Frothing Berserker first.
Double Consecrate.
Double Consecrate.
Oh, of course,
and that clears board. And how many Murlocs now have come out for Raven? I think it's just one Bluegill and one War Leader.
Yeah,
so
that anything's going to do nothing, right?
Nothing really to be scared of, especially when the Warrior is on 28.
But this isn't too bad for BoarControl, right? Because I guess you Death Spite, you Corcoran.
It's not too bad. He's got like 9 cards in hand.
You could even just throw down a Ghoul if you're worried about.
Why would you be worried?
You wouldn't be.
You've only seen 2 Murlocs. Like,
in the crazy land where he hasn't been counting Murlocs, when I know full well he has.
Because now
but he does throw it down.
But now you've got Death Spite Grom next turn. I mean, that card draw was insane. He's not even going to be bothered about both Consecrates being used.
Lay on Hands.
Lay on Hands is okay. I don't.
Does it save him though? 4, 8, 9. No.
What can he draw to save him? You know, like it's just delaying the inevitable.
Heal bot isn't. It's no mana. This is the issue.
And that will be it.
He's just hoping for no Grom, but we know Grom is there.
And there it is. That is going to be the game coming out. Death Spite going to be used to proc, gets the Enrage, has the charge on the Corcoran, and that is going to be the first one going the way of BoarControl. And I've got to say, some phenomenal drawing coming out from BoarControl. And as well, the fact that he got the Battle Rages into the 8 card draw for 4 mana is kind of ridiculous. But
yeah, it's I think, to be honest, Raven was plagued by, I guess, oversaturation of draw. He was like, he didn't have anything else. He didn't have early Murlocs to put down and try and contest the board just being minions. Yeah. And he was like, okay, I've got double equality, double Pyromancer here. Am I really expecting him to have all of this flood? I mean, I could probably blow one clear early on. Blows it on that board with the Frothing Berserker because he kind of had to, because he was going to take a lot of damage if there was a Whirlwind, for instance. And BoarControl just played it very well. He obviously had the right tools at the right time, and forcing the Murloc Paladin to use those equalities early on is the key to winning that matchup. And the issue with Patron is you don't actually invest that many of your minions to the board to force that equality combo to come out, because you're investing 1 Patron, remember. Obviously then everything else on top of that is just everything on top of that is just spells.
Yep.
So you're not actually investing that much to the board. And then obviously once you've invested 1 Patron, you have the other Patron to come through later on, and if you can get him to burn it, it's just a good way of playing the matchup.
Okay, well, we're going to be moving further on into this matchup, so it's 1-0 so far. And I'm curious to see what decks are chosen for this one. It looks like the next game is about to begin, so let's take a look at the remaining decks in this series. BoarControl currently 1-0 up, and actually winning out with his Patron as well, which I think is an important one to get out of the way, because I feel like sometimes Patron can be somewhat unreliable.
Yes.
In terms of
if you don't get the draws.
Exactly.
He did get the tools, and I think what was important is he got the minions to play instead of the Patrons. If he only had the Patron as an option, then Raven might have won that game with the equality clear. But now we're going to this game.
You definitely need to have the on-curve minions as a Patron Warrior to deal with Murloc Warrior. If you bank everything on turn 5, Death Spite Whirlwind, coin Whirlwind to get some more Patrons out there, and you lose to an equality Consecrate, or equality Wild Pyromancer, you're in a really tough situation. And this is a Tempo Mage with Arcane Blast coming out.
I mean, I can understand the decision for Tempo Mage because it's really good against Druid right now. Well, I say right now, it's always been quite good against Druid. But against Zoo, I think it does struggle.
It really depends on how effectively you can deal with the build-up of the board. But we can see that BoarControl's got a really nice anti-tempo mage hand here. Lots of death rattles, lots of if you ping my minion, it's going to spawn more minions type of things, including the Imp Gang boss. And you can see it's a very clunky hand, I would say, from Raven. He hasn't got that fabled Flamewaker Arcane Missiles combo. If he tries to clear this, he's wasting an Arcane Blast on the 1-2 if he plays the Sorcerer's Apprentice and pings it here as well. So
I mean, the Sorcerer's Apprentice off the top was kind of a godsend that he's able to play a minion.
Yes.
But do you feel bad playing the Sorcerer's Apprentice naked, like as in not providing a spell afterwards, because it always does feel better being able to play one of those spells for 1 less mana.
That's a pretty
terrible.
Terrible.
I mean, I was going to say, is a Seeker a good draw, just because if you can build up a board, you can get that 5/5, but I can understand the Shield Bearer here.
I like that you got a really good next turn play coming through from Raven, though. You Flamewaker, I guess, you trade your Sorcerer into the 1/2, and then you ping the 2/2 with your Arcane. Yeah, this is a nice play. Kind of gets him well set in terms of getting back towards some decent board control.
And if these Flamewakers hit, which they do, that is a really nice... That's a nice looking board now for Raven, actually.
It's a massive swing in terms of who's kind of in ahead of like the pace, like the tempo. Like now it feels like it's more BoarControl trying to catch up.
Yeah.
I think if BoarControl had something like an Abusive Sergeant, that would have been completely different. The fact that the Sorcerer's Apprentice was able to stay alive is absolutely huge for Raven.
I was thinking in my head, I know it feels awful to power overwhelming the Sorcerer's Apprentice, but I think I'm so scared of Tempo Mages being able to do that turn 3 play. And you've got to be thinking of Arcane Missiles as well, right? Which probably would have even been a worse situation for BoarControl. But he took that risk because nothing came down that turn. There was no Arcane Missiles that turn. There was no attempt to clear that turn. So now, and this is kind of this is the sort of the way that Tempo Mage plays. They may not necessarily have that early turns, but when they get towards the later turns...
So Raven opting to trade his Sorcerer's Apprentice in first, not taking any of those spells for cheap. And I guess that's because he was worried about these Flamewaker shots hitting into the Imp Gang boss and providing more imps.
Imagine if all of them went into the Imp Gang boss, you suddenly spawned like 4 imps.
You've essentially implosioned yourself.
Exactly, you've implosioned yourself. So it's not awful for BoarControl now. He's got a number of options, right?
I love the kappa on the bottom of Raven's bottle as well. It's beautiful. Every time he takes a swig, you just get a nice little kappa coming out. Kappa claws as well.
I didn't notice that, but I'm going to be looking out for it now.
So would you say Direwolf Alpha and just Shield Bearer? Like, you Direwolf Alpha, you play your 2/1 into their 2/3 Flamewaker, or, okay, you might even choose to do this.
You want to clear that Flamewaker, right?
Yeah,
that's your number 1 priority right now.
So I would probably say my ideal choice. Okay, he's going to go for this one. That's fine as well, to be fair. That is fine. I think maybe he's saving the Shield Bearer for the Mirror Entity.
I think the major thing is kind of you have that Shield Bearer as a backup. Should you need that taunt desperately from the Argus, you've still got a taunt in hand at least. So
that's going to feel so bad if he gets a Shield Bearer from Mirror Entity. You're not going to be expecting that, are you, when you drop it?
I mean, he knows it's Tempo Mage, so he knows Mirror Entity is probably the main secret that they play.
Yep.
So I guess keeping the Shield Bearer is fantastic, right? You love that. And it's also another card to potentially discard for the Doomguard, right? It's just one of those potential discard tools that you could use for your Doomguard. Oh, and he's going to play the Mirror Entity as well.
Ooh. I'm just imagining BoarControl's face right now.
Yeah, he's like,
because
have
at the
this
moment I've
Shield
just got
Bearer, buddy.
a cutout, cardboard cutout, it looks like.
Here we go. Shield Bearer.
Shield Bearer coming down, boys.
So he's going to give him another secret. If he was worried that it could have been something like... If he was worried that it might have been Counterspell, I can understand why he procced that next secret, just to make sure that a Mirror Entity did come down.
I don't mind the Gormok on curve here either. Not really on curve, but basically using the rest of your mana.
Is that other secret duplicate?
I think it's duplicate. Oh no. Duplicate the Shield Bearer. This has worked out incredibly well. I think he's going to even use the Fireball on Gormok just to make sure that doesn't happen too easily.
I think it sucks to have to use your Fireball like that, but honestly, that feels better than getting 2 more Shield Bearers in your hand, realistically.
He's going to get 2 more Shield Bearers in his hand regardless, right? Unless he plays another Taunt. Because you have to get through the Shield Bearer.
Yeah.
He's going to maybe just play Bran here as well. Having just seen...
I mean, you've got 2 taunts to hide as well, to hide behind him.
I mean, you're never going to play Doomguard while Bran is on the pitch, unless you've got an empty hand regardless.
Yeah.
That's such a British thing of you to say. On the pitch.
On the pitch, sorry about that. I mean, this is just straightforward from Raven. He's got the mana to do it, so he just plays everything.
So Raven really is going to be hoping to kind of... He needs card draw. It's what he needs. If he wants any chance of winning this game, he needs some card draw. And that is the problem. Tempo Mage does run out of tempo against a Zoo when a Zoo can just continually tap.
You really want to get rid of Bran before playing these cards, because both of them are horrible.
Well, I suppose if you just Flame Imp, accept the 6 damage, then Power Overwhelming something, then you play your Doom Guard.
So would you trade your Shield Bearer into the 5/4 with Power Overwhelming, or would you Power Overwhelming your Direwolf after you've traded your Shield Bearer into the 3/1?
I think onto your own Shield Bearer is a fine play. I mean, obviously, the counterspell.
Counterspell, yeah. I mean, obviously he didn't know about the counterspell, but
I think you just suck it up and take the 6 damage here.
Yeah, and then you just play Doom Guard for free, because you're never going to get another opportunity while Bran's alive to play Doom Guard.
And that's such a commanding
board. You can
board.
trade the Doom Guard even into the 5/4 as well.
Exactly.
You've got 7 health to play with. It's really not something you're too concerned about.
Raven was kind of... He was looking at that play oddly. He was like, why is he taking 6 damage? Oh, okay. The Doom Guard comes out.
1 mana deals 6 damage to face.
And the Fireball really isn't going to help Raven.
I don't know, buy some time with those Shield Bearers.
Yeah, drop those bad boys on the pitch.
Even just like
top quality minion right here.
Do you even just send 1 ping towards the Doom Guard and hope that you like can get rid of it next turn?
Yeah, that's the play that's going to happen, because I guess you, even despite the 2 awful minions with Bran, you are worried about something like a Defender coming down.
Yeah.
Imp Gang Boss is nice.
Yeah, that is nice. And I think the only hope for Raven now is getting that Arcane Intellect to draw some extra cards.
And he wants this to hit face, but obviously it doesn't.
That sucks that the juggle hit, actually, because he can clear both taunts now. He couldn't have cleared both of the taunts without the juggles, so...
Just the Frostbolt coming for Raven, though, and that isn't going to help.
But it does buy time, because he can ping the 5/1 as well. But
so
realistically...
only 5 damage on board still.
Realistically, you're hoping for Arcane Intellect or something like a Dr. Boom off the top.
Yeah.
He's used a Fireball as well.
Speaking of,
speaking of, I say this all the time. I say, and a Dr. Boom off the top. It wasn't for the right player this time, but...
Well, we'll see what it's going to be.
Esports, Deathwing.
Deathwing.
Here we go.
Not Deathwing.
No,
but
wait,
pretty decent.
It could have been worse.
Yeah.
Definitely could have been worse.
It's not awful.
It sucks that you're going to proc imps with it, but there are certainly worse things to have gotten.
You just trade you trade your 3/2 and your Boombot into it, and then just go face with everything else. Or even though you can just make sure the Boombots hit face. That's fine.
I mean, actually, that was a pretty good unstable portal.
It was pretty decent.
Yeah.
Bought him some time for sure.
Only 3 damage from the Boombots as well, which realistically you can't really hope for much less than that. Soulfire could be a bit of a kick in the crotch though for Raven.
And he's going to go all in here because he's got that Soulfire.
Yeah. I mean, and then, again, it's the same situation as Doom Guard. Maybe holding the Soulfire, actually. I feel like you maybe could have just played that, just because 4 extra damage. You've got so much board control.
I mean, realistically, you've got 1 card being drawn next turn.
True.
Likelihood is you can play it anyway. So you don't want to give away what you got from that 2/1, just in case something magically brings him back into the game. It's like the surprise factor. It's like, oh, I've drawn something here. Wonder what it is. You know, like. But yeah. It's kind of works the same with Freeze Mage, that even if you've got the burst, or with Face Shaman, even if you've got that burst to start burning with your mana that turn, you sometimes hold on to it because you don't want to give away. You don't want to give away that I'm going to start burning your face because I've got lethal in the next few turns.
Yeah.
You hold it back and say, I've got the mana to do this next turn or over the next 2 turns. I don't want him to suddenly start spamming heal bots or something because he feels threatened, and then you surprise them with the burst, and then it comes through. It's all about playing that mind game of like, I don't want to scare them into suddenly playing like some random Reno Jackson or something like that, you know. And obviously BoarControl knew that wasn't the case, but I think so many players are used to just holding on to their burn until they know they've got lethal.
Yeah.
It kind of just works that way most of the time.
So the Tempo Mage running out of tempo in that game, I think he kind of just...
You were holding on to that one for a little while. You were just like, I just want to say that.
No, I wasn't. I've not been waiting 5 minutes. He kind of drew all his removal a bit too late. He kind of needed it a bit earlier. The Flame Cannon, the Frostbolt all came out at the end.
The Mana Worm would have liked to have been in turn 1, you know.
But the last deck from BoarControl is Druid. And Tempo Mage is known to be very good against Druid. So...
To be honest, all of Raven's lineup's pretty good against Druid. If it's a aggro hunter, if it's a secret or an aggro paladin, and Tempo Mage, all of them do pretty well against Druid. So it's like one of those situations that he could reverse sweep because Druid may have a hard time dealing with it.
Well, we'll have to see. I mean, the Wild Growth in hand is definitely going to be something BoarControl's
And
very
the
happy with.
And the Innovate. So you keep the Wild Growth and the 4-drop because you know that your theoretical method of play is going to be turn 2 Wild Growth, turn 3 4-drop. Otherwise, you would obviously never keep that 4-drop in hand. And now he's hoping that he draws a Shade Nax Ramus or another 4-drop, or even just maybe, I don't know. Let me think what you can innovate on turn 4. 6-drop. Or
it makes his turn 2 play quite interesting. Do you just Wild Growth turn 2, or do you innovate out the Shredder?
Depends what I think you're facing against.
Or you could just kind of Wild Growth and then play a Shredder, and then play another Shredder.
Yeah, that's fine as well, to be perfectly honest. That's absolutely fine. I don't think you rush the Shredder unless you're facing like a Mana Worm or something, if a Mana Worm comes down. But even then, Shredder is such an awful tool to play into a turn 2 of a Tempo Mage, right? Because of Frostbolt.
Yep.
Frostbolt completely annihilates the Shredder.
And we can obviously see the Frostbolt in hand. Yeah, Shade could be a spanner in the works. Well, you've got to assume Wild Growth surely is the play here.
Yeah, but look at... I mean, I think Wild Growth's the fine play. Completely fine. But you see Sorcerer's Apprentice. So are you thinking in BoarControl a secret could come down? And I prefer this because turn 2... Or, turn 2, Mirror Entity, Wild Growth turn 3/4, obviously, you just give them a piloted Shredder. And I much prefer this. It forces the turn 2 Frostbolt for 1 mana, which is kind of awkward.
And really, if anything with 2 attack comes out of that Shredder, that's going to be quite painful for Raven here. But I don't see a different play, so he's going to go for it. Oh, okay, well, that keeps him alive, but it does provide more card draw for the Druid.
You could Wild Growth and Living Roots here, or you could just Shade. Either one is fine, to be honest.
Your only concern about Shade is Flame
Waker,
Cannon?
or Flame Cannon and Flame Waker and Flame
Either
Cannon.
or, it feels very vulnerable at its 2 health.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be worried about the turn 3 Flame Waker Arcane Missiles, or like you said, just that Flame Cannon. I actually think Flame Cannon would have come down onto the piloted Shredder if it was there, just because you know that you're getting value out of that target then. So he's going to go for the Shade.
Interesting one to come out here. So going to be able to get a cheeky little bit of face damage as well. The Shade going to start to ramp up, but I'm curious to see when we see this Living Roots come out. Whether, I mean, you could even simply just Wild Growth Hero Power, just clear board.
Yeah, I actually like using the Living Roots now and the Wild Growth because Mirror Entity is such a difficult card to deal with as a Druid because realistically all of your minions are very, very, very high value in terms of mana cost. So Mirror Entity is almost guaranteed to get value out. And I think Save the Shade, obviously, because of the removal that the mage has. You want to use that for lethal at this point.
And by using Living Roots, he was also able to test for Counterspell as well.
Exactly, yeah.
So I love that play from Raven. I mean, he can give him, what, an Azure Drake?
Yes.
And then kill it with his own Shade?
That's a fine play. Or you could Lower Theb. He's going to Savage Roar here. Okay. I quite like that as well.
Aggressive play coming out. He's going to be able to kill that Peddler as well, should he wish to. Get a good chunk of that 9 damage onto face, which turn 5, not really expecting from a Druid.
No, I mean, I do really like the aggressive play from BoarControl because, he wants to play around Mirror Entity as long as he physically can, and when you have the option to, it is completely fine.
What on earth do you take here?
Do you take Vaporize and just in the hopes that he doesn't test for it? Or do you Flame Lance just to know that you can deal with the Shade?
I mean, even Polymorph kind of deals with the Shade, but he's going to go for the Vaporize.
I like this because you can ping off that 1/1, and now something is going to die to Vaporize, usually of pretty good value.
But there is the Lower Theb in hand here, should he choose to go for that. He's hovering the Shredder and Wild Growth. I mean, he already has pretty decent coverage of the board at this stage.
But he has to trade something into that 6/3, and it has to realistically be his 5/5.
And something's still going to get
Mirror
copied.
Entities, yeah. And we know that there's a very healthy-looking late-ish game hand for Raven sitting in for the Tempo Mage.
I think you've got to give him something this turn, especially if you've got the Engine of War in hand. You really don't want to give one of those away.
But you're making the choice between giving him Lower Theb, Azir Drake. I wouldn't even mind Azir Drake trade your 5/5 and then force him to ping next turn.
It does leave the 6/3 on board, but I think you're okay with that. The fact you can deal with that board and keep your minions alive rather than trading directly, i.e. with a low Theb, you lose your shade and you are forcing the ping.
The interesting thing for me about Druid, right, is in this situation, and also playing against Tempo Mage, the more times you can force him to use mana pinging, the better it is for you. He obviously may not even need to here. Never lucky.
It's both of the targets. Flamewaker always doing its job. But I think Ancient of War is a solid play here.
Yeah, but Vaporize, I really hope Vaporize comes into play here, because that would be that would be absolutely amazing to see.
And Raven should be, BoarControl will be tracking that card. He will know that that card's been picked, and he'll be wondering what it is. When he does see the secret come down, he'll be thinking, okay, what is this secret? And he's going to be calculating in his head, and he's going to be worried about it.
Yeah, so he knows that came from the Ethereal Conjurer. Now, BoarControl, we know, is likely going to trade into this 2/4 Flamewaker here. I think he might even be worried about Duplicate. He may even trade into the Mad Scientist being worried about Duplicate.
He's testing for another mirror entity.
No, BoarControl!
Don't do it!
Don't do it, BoarControl!
Oh, God.
Oh, goodness.
That's...
Like you said, you never expect the Vaporize.
I wish so badly we had BoarControl's webcam right now. The despair. Maybe that makes me a bad human. I want to watch that, but
you just want to watch people suffer. This turn is made slightly awkward because of Lower Theb.
Yeah.
I guess you just you just play a 6-mana Archive Missiles.
Pray for killing the Shade.
Pray for killing the Shade.
Well, that's
fine. So Flamewaker not doing its job properly this turn.
So I think the theory, let's get inside BoarControl's head from that last turn. He was probably expecting it to be Duplicate. And he didn't really want to give any of those over to BoarControl, and he thought, okay, go face here. No one picks Vaporize. I mean, Vaporize is such a terrible card. But against Druid, it kind of has merit, right? It's an okay card against Druid.
Yeah, it's like against this kind of deck where the vast majority of the cards are going to be relatively big minions.
And high value, yeah.
And things you can't really afford to throw away. You can get away with playing that.
So you're saving the Wild Growth to test for Counterspell, I imagine, right? That's the only reason it's stuck in BoarControl's hand. He's like, I need to test for it at some point.
Well, you probably wouldn't have used it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, obviously...
You'd wait for the card draw.
Yeah, there was that turn 6 play where he could have potentially used Wild Growth and Piloted Shredder.
That's interesting. I wonder if he did keep that, knowing the Counterspell's in deck. I like your thinking.
I don't think he knew Counterspell was there. Okay, wow, he is going aggressive here. He's going to take out the 2/4. And now he's thinking, okay, I'm pretty sure I know what this is. Not Duplicate, it's not Mirror Entity. Let's hope to God it's not another Vaporize, which obviously can't happen. So I know this is probably Counterspell now. And he's got the tools to deal with it in his hand.
So now do you Archmage into Portal? Just start to
look
for
You're dead if you do that, I
think.
Oh, of course,
unless you Portal into something crazy.
I mean, you're not...
You could fire
you are dead regardless, even without the swipe.
Still... No, yeah, because Shade will gain another damage.
I think you've got to trade your Scientist into the Shade.
Yeah, and I think you've got a Fireball Lower Theb. Lock Knight's good. Old Murkai, come to save the day. Is that another secret? Is that another mirror entity, I would imagine, then?
I would have thought so.
I'll double check.
Only one way to find out, Keenan.
It's Duplicate. So it is actually he's running one of every secret in this situation.
Well played.
Yeah, and the swipe comes down for lethal, and BoarControl going to take the series here. 3-0 versus Raven.
Solid performance from BoarControl, and he was very patient with his plays. He didn't rush anything, even when some of the plays were quite